What's up, everybody? This is Dan Shak here with you, episode 8 of On the 50 with Chris Walker of Flow Sports. What's up, Chris?
Yo, what's up? This is going to be a little weird for everyone because this isn't about me. I'm a nobody here. This is about you, Dan. Why does Dan Shak have On the 50 on FloMarching? And why is my daughter yelling through the through the door right now? These are the things we have to ask ourselves.
At home life. This is quarantine life.
But yeah, Dan, what is it about you that makes you so lovable? You know, in this world, like, everyone knows who Dan Shak is. When I'm walking around the lot, you're kind of this personality out there. Not only are you working with Carolina Crown, or you were working as the battery. What was your official title the past couple years?
Battery manager.
Battery manager, but now you're taking on a new role. Can you tell me what that is?
That's right. I'm currently the production manager of Carolina Crown.
Production manager. So what is the difference there for the laymen and women out there?
Well, that's a great question, and it's not as simple of an answer because it's a created role for me, as I tend to kind of slip in and out of creating kind of my own jobs at places. This is another one of those. And, it came from a need to sort of bridge the gap between the artistic designer and program coordinator, who's Rick Subel, and, kind of the day-to-day functioning of the group as we get on the road. I tended to do a lot of time on the road, and, the designers come in and out, and they have, their lives and their families. And, I was kind of in that day-to-day grind, obviously with the drum line up into a certain point. And, we felt like there was a need to have someone that was sort of the liaison to the program coordinator who could speak to the show, speak to what kind of the intentions are and what the kind of the purpose of ideas were, how things tie together, trying to kind of make the connection between visual, musical, conceptual, things like that. So it kind of arose out of that need. And, I am the creative director at George Mason. I just finished, I believe, my third year in that role. So I have a little bit of an eye towards the big picture and thinking about the way that various elements come together, rather than just thinking like, this is what the drum line does. Even at George Mason, I'm constantly thinking about the way the conception of the show works and like what's the very first idea of the program. And then I also do the choreography for the drum line. So that's pretty much top to bottom. And the choreographer is actually the person who goes last. So I'm involved in the process from essentially the very first inkling of an idea all the way to implementing those ideas into the choreography. So that, I guess, kind of naturally turned into a more holistic or global vision of how you look at these shows. And I couldn't even probably attest to how that happened. It's just a natural part of my trajectory from being a tech and being on the ground, so to speak. And it kind of just naturally evolved. So I'm lucky to be involved kind of in the planning stages with Crown and being on the calls with all those guys. And, we didn't get to the summer. So I actually don't know how that role would have panned out, how it would have changed the process of how Crown kind of puts their show out there. But, I do know we're still writing the music, we're still planning and still communicating in that way. But it's another kind of role that is a little bit unorthodox. And honestly, I've created many of the jobs that I do have in the marching arts. People kind of just ask me what I want to do, and then we sort of invent the title, including the creative director role at Mason. So there's no linear answer to that. It's just I sort of started in one place, and all of a sudden I've just kind of evolved in my roles.
And that is clearly not a normal thing, right? Just to be making up job titles as you go. So there is something about what you do, what you bring to the table, maybe your education style or the way you teach, in the way you collaborate with other creators. What are some things that you think have helped you in the past to kind of have that open mindset to be able to create collectively?
That's a great question. It's hard to know. I think it's a kind of variety of things, and the first one was just being a member of good groups, and Not necessarily being a good member, honestly. If you ask probably some of the last people that taught me, I was someone with an opinion. By the time I stopped marching, I had done 7 years of drum corps and I think 3 of independent world indoor, but I had been, pretty much a member involved from the age of 14 to 21. So that was like a really solid chunk of my focus and my life, as a teenager and then into college. And by the time I was 21 and I was marching, Rhythm X, or I was marching the Cavaliers, I definitely had an opinion about things that were happening. And I don't think I was like a totally disruptive person, because I have like a semi-good like social sense, which probably is part of the answer to your question. But I certainly had like some sense of awareness of how things were going, how we were doing things, how they were working, the way we were being taught, and I certainly can tell you, like, now that I have students that are at the top level, they do have opinions. The better the students get, the more opinions they have, and that can actually seem like disruptive to the teaching process, but ultimately disruptive students can become good leaders. So I think the fact that I had any thought about what was happening as a member probably led to me actually having good leadership skills, because as a leader, you need to have opinions on basically everything. So I think step one was like being that type of member where I was like thinking about the things that we were doing. Then from there, I think it was a matter of like, like everyone has some talent. If you march in a drum corps in an indoor drum line, you've gotten there somehow and you have some talent. So that isn't any different for me. And I don't even think that I was like much better than the people that I was around. And in many cases, I wasn't. I had people that were better drummers. They hit their dots better than I did. Things like that. Like, I don't think that I was necessarily like the best one. But I think that I had a sense of work ethic, and I wanted to be really badass and really good. And like, I would pretty much do whatever it took to be the best. And I think that probably culminated with the Cavaliers when I was able to be the section leader there, and we won drums. And I just wanted to be good, and I wanted to be good by really being friends with everyone. And like, I think as a leader in that position, it was like, how are we going to get there is by like being on the same team and by like being in the same boat and like rowing at the same pace and collaborating in that way. And so I don't think it was out of talent. It was more out of like a drive or like a desire to like go as far as I possibly could. Because at one point I didn't even know how I was going to break into DCI. I was like getting cut, and I didn't feel like it was ever going to happen. I was just marching a DCA group, and like that was a very valuable experience, and I did get better there. But I was like trying to figure out how to crack into that world-class level, and I wasn't. And then all of a sudden I'm at the end of it, and I was like, I need to make the most of it. And not that I did that perfectly, but I think that I was very driven to like do something special. I had a vision in my mind for what I wanted the drumline to like look like and be like and operate like, and like the overall identity of the group, even as a member. And as an instructor, that's not necessarily something that you will ask of your members, but some of them will do that, and then you have to kind of see how you pick that up to your benefit so that they're not derailing. So those kind of thought processes and skills, I think, kind of they evolve as you become a tech. And I started out as sort of like a battery and visual tech, teaching open class at the Cadets Winter Percussion Group, and 14 were open class, and at 7th Regiment. And I had a vision for like what I felt like drumline choreography should look like. So all of a sudden, I'm being tasked with choreographing the group a little bit. At 7th Regiment, I was tasked with choreographing the brass a little bit. So I'm thinking already like globally. And I was only, like kind of snare, battery, and visual tech at 7th, but then I started being brought up to the box and doing a little bit like perk ensemble and doing a little bit of full ensemble and just getting to like literally zooming out. And I always think about this, like, when you're a tech, you're as close to the product as possible. You're right in front. Then as you kind of zoom out in your role, you're like actually seeing and hearing more. Like, it's not even just like a metaphor. Like, as you get higher up into the box, like you're looking at more and you notice different and kind of like just a different like scope of things. So it kind of just started at 7th, where it's like, get in the box. You're giving good battery comments, or like if the captain wasn't there, it was just a need, honestly. And honestly, like, again, this is circumstantial. So then I get hired at Crossman. I was at the Crossman 15 and 16, and I was the battery visual tech. But in that role, I like ran the morning block, so I would like establish protocol with the drum line and the way that we would rehearse, and I would run yoga with the drum line, and then eventually, like when the caption head wasn't there, I was tasked with like doing perk ensemble and running the drum line and like establishing a method to do that. That's just circumstantial that the people that I was working with at that time like felt that they could trust me to do that. And that feeds like season to season is like, if you don't mess it up, okay, now I go back to cadets winter percussion in the winter of 2015. I'm promoted to the battery coordinator there, but I'm pretty much like on all the design calls. I'm choreographing the drum line with Travis, who's the program coordinator at the time, teaching the full drum line, and like I'm up top, so I'm in the box. And that year we like did some groundbreaking stuff, and we got like 6th place overall our first year in Independent World, and that's just like a great show. And so that's just like another like check rather than a minus. So I was like, okay, that like went the right way, and then did a couple years there, and just kept going back and forth. It's like, I think it was very circumstantial, but it was almost like I just kept not messing up. And I guess like to go back to like the talent versus like effort thing, like I like put a lot of effort into making the groups good and having a very high standard, like an uncomfortably high standard for a lot of the groups and a lot of like students who hadn't been at that level yet. And I saw my students from the cadets winter percussion, who were all like DCA and open class students, they like all started making DCI. So it was also a matter of like, you're churning students out into like that bigger kind of machine, which is like DCI world class. And then like, obviously we got promoted to world for indoor. So it's all moving together. It's like one story that's kind of moving together. And honestly, like there's a lot of talented people out there, but you can't work with them, and those people go away. So I think if I could like answer your question after this very unwieldy kind of rant, it would be like, I'm okay. Like I kind of know what's going on, and I do have a very high standard, but I think like I'm very collaborative, and I understand how to work with people, and I understand how to take feedback, and I understand how to admit when I'm wrong and actually like input someone else's idea that's just a better idea. Like the best idea has to be the one that wins out if what you're doing is for the benefit of the group and the students to have a good time. So I think once I was able to go like, it's not about me, it's not about like my stuff being in a show, like that's my forced arch, that's my triplet roll. It was more like, this is what's best for the product, that allowed me to like move along in doing this. And I wasn't getting fired, and I wasn't, being demoted or whatever, because I was just like, yeah, this is the best thing for the group, and I'm going to do that, or I'm going to like allow that to happen.
So I don't know if this is taking it back or being more present, but who has been your biggest mentor along the way? If you could just find one person that has guided you the most, maybe inspired you, who's that person?
It's not the easiest answer, because I think there's a few different people.
You only get one. If
I had to get one, I would say it's Travis Peterman, who he's like a year older than me, so I don't know if it's like the like mentorship, but like him and I have we marched Rhythm X together, and we marched United together, so we were in lines together, and we had opinions about those lines. And then once we both aged out, it's actually crazy, because I was going to teach Cadets 2, which was a DCA group that unfortunately folded. I was going to teach there in the summer of 2000, and I think it was actually 12, which is my age out year, and I decided not to do it because I just didn't think that was the right thing to do, because I didn't march my age out. So I actually recommended him to the caption head. From Cadets 2, they bred Cadets Winter Percussion. That came after, because Cadets 2 existed in 12 and 13, and then in 14 they started CWP, and he asked me to come on as a snare tech there. So we had like helped each other get these gigs. From there, I mean, we haven't stopped working with each other since 2014. We've worked every single season together. We weren't teaching drum corps together until 17, when he hired me on at Crown, when he became the percussion caption head. But he, him and I are foils. Like we're like best friends, and we've like been working together this whole time. But he is like hyper organized. He's hyper diligent in like detail oriented tasks. He's like the ideal manager. And because of that, like I do have good organizational skills and managerial skills and I use them. But because he is like very much that, I'm able to be more like unwielding and like creative. And I'm able to be less like strict in how I prepare myself. I am very prepared, and we can talk about the way that I go about that. But because he acts as like this structural support to these groups, I just show up and like think more openly and not be so like rigid with the way that at least I do things, especially when it comes to like choreography or design or like those kinds of things. So we've been very like, I think we fill in the gaps like in that yin yang kind of situation, and we're super honest with each other and we're very open with each other. So like we get into like not into arguments at all, but we'll have very like heated conversations about like literally a single detail. But it's that thing that we were talking about where it's like if his idea is the best idea, we'll talk about why it is, and we'll implement his idea versus like I'm like, this is what it needs to be, and this is why. And he'll be like, dude, let's do that. And like, if it doesn't work, we'll just change it. It's not like these things are permanent anyway. So I think as a collaborator, like Travis and I have, I don't think either of us would be doing the things that we would be doing if it weren't for the other person. We've been like very like supportive to each other, and we're like partners in doing this. You know what I mean? So that's been really important because you need someone to check you, and he's been one of those people that has been able to check me. So I don't know if it's that like mentor because we're like basically the same age and we have a very similar vision for what we intend to do in the activity. But he's been like a huge part of like how I've been able to like blossom and grow and realize what I want to do.
Man, you got to have someone in your corner. I think about, back whenever I would actually be social, when that was allowed, or before having kids, really, before all this. You go to a party, right? Maybe it's a friend of a friend. You don't really know that many people there, and you can maybe be the kind of person that blossoms in a new environment. Or if you have one friend that you can like really rely on, you can just start making friends with all these other people. And I think when you have someone that's in your corner, like Travis, and you guys are kind of moving in the same direction, you're able to just blossom in your environment. And it sounds like you two work really well together. I don't want to totally exhaust this idea, but when you were marching, how did your goals change? Like, what were your goals for being in the activity on the student side? And then how did that change once you started dipping your toes into the other side?
I just don't think as a member, I don't know that you have like an explicit thought. I think it's just like, I'm going to be a member who shuts up and is super badass and works hard and see where that gets you. I did know like I wanted to be in a really aggressive, in your face, fast drum line. I was like really dedicated to marching the cadets. Like I was looking at the early 2000s cadets, up to the point that I auditioned in 2007. And I was just like, this is exactly what I want to do. Like these drum lines are so in your face and like so uniform, and like you can't tell one person from the other, and that uniformity and like sort of disappearing into the group. That was something that was really attractive to me, was like being part of something like bigger and something that is just, how do you do it? Like you look at like the 2005 cadets and it's like, how do they get there? And you realize like it just takes time and it takes the conditioning. But as someone auditioning and really like when I was just marching in the Hurricanes and I was just building my like chops, it was just a matter of, I just want to absorb as much as I can. And I just want to like drum a lot. And I was always drumming. I was always like during breaks, drumming with my friends. It was not something we like spoke of or agreed on. It was just like, I want to learn every lick that's out there. And I was like, and there wasn't like the YouTube accessibility now. So I was like going online and finding transcriptions of Phantom Regiment beats when Paul Rennick was there, or finding like, or I had instructors that were in the Bluecoats or in the cadets, and they would send me the full book and I would learn the entire book. So it was just like, well, this is what people play. I need to learn how to play this. I was learning a lot of the Rhythm X licks from 2008, 2009, like the entire book. So the goals weren't explicit. It was like, I really want to just be absorbing all these really cool beats. And like in doing that, I think I got a decent amount of like strength and chops, which is super important. It's something people like skip because they just want to get to the tricks. But they don't realize that world-class drummers, the foundation of that is strength. And when you build on that, then everything is better. And that's like the major difference between a world-class drummer and not. You see these drummers on Instagram playing crown beats, but they're completely missing the substance of drumming on a drum so much that your quality improves. So I was like just chopping out so much because I just really enjoyed drumming with people and just playing. So that was all it is. It was very simple. It wasn't like I'm going to become a world-class designer. I didn't even think about teaching at all. I was really not really considering how I was going to, I actually wasn't considering my future at all, to be very honest. Not that I could say that I totally am now, maybe a little more, but I was very much just like, I'm going to try to get to that world-class level. And I don't know what it's going to be like, but I'm going to just try to do it. And I'm interested in maybe people's perception of what I was doing at that time that was different. And I'm like super excited. Actually, Mike McIntosh is going to be on the program in a bit. And I do want to talk to him about what his perceptions are. Cause like, I think at times I was probably difficult. Right. And like we said, like now that I'm in a position where I actually can make decisions, I think that there's more of like an explicit vision, which is to combine all of the qualities of groups that are out there that I love, and to combine that into the most hybrid thing you see. And that for me has been Mason the last couple of years, and it's been Crown since about 2017 when I got there. It's been like, what do I like about what the Blue Coats do? What do I like about what Cadets do? What do I like about what Cavaliers do? What I like every group that I am a fan of, because I observe every group. Like I wish I was one of those people that put my head in the sand and then just emerged and like I had this thing, but it's not. I'm an observer and a fan. So I look at all these groups that do different things really well, and I try to do all of that, and I try to do it clean. So I think that's also a major part, is like sounding really great, being extremely musical and expressive, but also having the best choreography. Like I don't want to just have good choreo and then be dirty or like just play loud. So it's like these two, like looking at every spectrum and then trying to get the most out of each one, and then get that perfectly hybrid approach that is fan friendly and it's contemporary and it's, you know, trying to be forward thinking. Like I'm not going to sit here and tell you like I'm not trying to push the boundaries of what's being done or just do something that's comfortable. I do try to come out and ask more of the students and have a more intuitive approach based on what they like, because every group that you teach is completely different and the students are completely evolving. So I don't have a singular approach at all. My approach is evolving as the students evolve, and it's adapting to what they like too.
One thing that strikes me when you're talking here is you can think about other fields of, I don't know, if you play basketball, I want to make the NBA, you know, or if you play some other sports, you want to play at the highest level, right? So to some extent, when you move up to, you know, the Cavaliers and you win drums, that's like the highest level at that time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So whether or not that was your goal, you kind of stayed focused on getting better, and you met what could be someone else's dream goal, whether or not that was your ultimate goal, right? While you're in there. And I think the same can be said about when you're designing for these groups, like to be at Crown right now and however you got into Crown, it's just, it doesn't sound like you're saying, I want to do this thing that's way over here so far away. You're just trucking through. You kind of have that grit and you're just working the rails down the track, you know?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. I think unfortunately, you know, even since I stopped marching to now, like the way the internet is and the way everything is so accessible, even like your favorite snare drummers on Instagram, you know what I mean? Like all my students have Instagram accounts and they have like followers, and it's really cool, but it makes it seem like the end is like this very specific thing that you can just like try to set out for. Like I, by no means ever thought of that I would be like a section leader winning a Fred Sanford. I by no means ever thought I'd march Cavaliers. It was one of my favorite drum corps. Like one of my earliest shows I ever saw was 2002, Cavaliers Frameworks, and like looking at that group and the uniformity and the complete like the mechanism of that group, I was like, I'm never going to be able to do that. It's in Chicago. I'm from Connecticut. Like that's just not in my reality. And I think probably because it didn't seem like a reality, I wasn't like, I'm going to win drums. I'm going to be the section leader. Like I was just like, I'm going to get chops and I'm going to just like do what I like doing. And I think now that we have these like very accessible like mediums through which, you know, people who are coming up and like younger students can access, they might be like trying to project too far into a future that's like way specific versus like letting themselves like move through it a little bit more naturally. So I think like because I missed the YouTube and the Instagram kind of phase, I think what you're saying is right. It was just like, I'm going to shoot as many threes as I can until I'm hitting threes, right?
Also, just think about the odds of it working out, like for you to win drums. Like, there's so many groups out there, right? And only one a year gets to do it. And it's not always the same, though I guess, you know, it kind of rotates around, but it's not always the same group every year. So, you kind of, to set your goal to be, I want to win drums or, you know, get a first place trophy or medal is almost like, I don't think that is the right kind of goal to have anyway, right? I think going about being better at your craft, being better at your instrument, and then surrounding yourself with as many different ideas, different people as possible, the way that you went about doing it, I think it really served you well.
Circumstance, right? I think that's kind of what you're talking about. It's like I circumstantially ended up in whatever situation, and then like once that situation happened, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna like mess this up. So like I show up to Cavaliers at spring training in 2010 after I like sent a video submission because their ninth snare quit. I happened to get that spot somehow. Like I'm super lucky. I don't know what happened. I actually had Brian Stockard, who is the Vic Firth rep that you probably know. He was one of my snare techs at United, and he marched with the battery coordinator who was at Cavaliers at the time, Tim Maynard. So I got a good recommendation because I hadn't messed up at United. I had done a good job. So again, like year-to-year recommendations, and then like I got the spot at Cavaliers and I showed up and I had to like kind of like relearn how to do everything at Cavaliers, but I didn't quit. I didn't like mess up. I mean, I was struggling and it was hard, but by the end of that, I was okay, right? And I came back, and then they were like, hey, you have some qualities that we're looking for. We might be considering you to be the center. And I was the center of Hurricanes for 3 years. So again, it was like, it's almost like this compounding, like positive interest, or it's like not like, and that's a thing. Like when you look at someone with 5 years of DCI experience, but they march a different corps every year, that's a very bad sign. It's a red flag. Staying at one group and building yourself in an environment and in a culture, that's what we really look for. And that's kind of what I try to do. I was at the Hurricanes for 5 years, you know, and I wasn't at Cavaliers as long as I wish I was. You know, I could have marched one more year, and same with Rhythm X, but sticking it out with a group so that I like learn what their expectation is, and then I can like grow in that environment where there's like an expectation that I understand. So it's not just like I'm getting experience or whatever. It's like I'm trying to grow in a place that I'm part of building, rather than just like, oh, the experience is like happening to you and it's like coming from up top. It was like, hey, you're assisting in what this is going to be. So like, I do think what you said about the chance and the circumstance of winning, it is pretty low. Obviously, I think when you look at what Vanguard's been doing, you look at a group like the Blue Devils. If you go to Blue Devils, you're probably going to win either a caption or overall. Right now, if you go to Vanguard as a percussionist, you're probably going to win drums. That's fine. Those are just the statistics. I have no problem with that, right? So those are those groups. But for Cavaliers, like Cavaliers won drums in 2000, 2011, and nothing in between. So it was very circumstantial. I was lucky that I caught two really, really strong years. Like 10 and 11 are two like my favorite shows of that core of groups I was in and not, right? So I was lucky, and I think maybe the end thesis of this is like when you get an opportunity, you have to take it, and you can't mess up that opportunity. You have to like do everything you can to make it a really like substantial and good opportunities so that like both you have a good time and then the people who are teaching you and the people you're around like you. Like if you're unlikable, you're not going to have a good time and you're going to be bad. And groups have won, but those groups, they probably don't look back and go like, man, that was a great time. They're like, we had to kill each other, but we won. Like that's not really what I was looking for. I was looking to like be friends with everyone and be bros and have a good time. And I think that was the first thing. And then like the winning comes after that, you know?
With having a positive attitude and being opinionated, sometimes you might find yourself into some sticky situations. So here's a question that Andy actually put out here. Do you have any controversial opinions about band, the activity, drum corps, rulings? I mean, anything about it, or I mean, there's so many little things that go into making this activity what it is. What's something that you think maybe you go a different direction than the herds?
Well, I think there's like a couple different approaches to that answer, and there's like, you know, my personal like philosophical approach as a teacher and as a designer, and then there's like my opinions as a spectator. I think possibly what has hurt me in the past is that I push students, and honestly the people that I work with, I push them really hard. And I have not cared that much about the student experience up to a certain point. Like I was just beating ass and like, not even like physically, but just like asking a lot of the students, because that was what my experience was specifically at Cavaliers, was like, this is going to be perfect or it's a failure. And I think that was ingrained in me by a few people that taught me there. And even at Rhythm X, where it's like at Rhythm X, like they expect you to achieve on the first try. And that's not at all like an overstatement. Like when Tim Jackson teaches you body, and we were learning body and music at the same time, by rote. And it was like, yeah, you're the best in the world. Do this right now. And if you expect to be the best in the world, yeah, you're going to fail right now, but this is the expectation. So like setting a really high bar has made, you know, certain students that I work with uncomfortable, or like certain people that I work with who were like above me were just like, oh man, he's like pushing way harder than like I do. And that's like messing up the hierarchy almost. So I had like some high schools that I work with were like, they didn't like that I was like bringing in this, like, honestly, like a world-class standard. Right. So that's, you know, that's been a little bit of an issue, especially when I was like right out of the gate. But I think now like I have figured out a little bit of a better balance for having a like ridiculous standard, but also like I want my students to like me, and I want my students to have a good time, and I want them to come back. And that is important, and that's the way we've built these cultures, is by like the vets that we keep. And like our vets at Crown and Mason are like the best students you can have, and it's because they like listen to what I said and they listen to what we said. So it does work, and I know it works. And some of them have gone off to march, you know, groups like Rhythm X or Broken City or whatever, and they're really strong students at those groups too, or like Blue Devils, etc. So I'm trying to train students that are the best in the world, and like if you expect that to be easy, like you're crazy. And you know, I've definitely been called like a coach because I get like super aggressive and super fired up, and that can be misconstrued by students and observers as me being mean or being angry. But I'm really never angry at students because I'm teaching them. They don't know what to expect, and I'm teaching them how to be in the group more than even like how to drum. So, you know, I definitely think that coaching mindset and getting them fired up, even if it means they're like getting a little mad or getting a little frustrated, like there is like something to be yielded from like getting kids fired up. So I do stand by that. And I guess I'm just like an excited person, which I didn't always know that I was like always fired up until I like probably March Cavaliers are like, you're so East Coast. Like I don't really know what that means, but I guess what it meant was like, I'm just an aggressive person, and I kind of just say what needs to be said rather than like packaging it in a way that's like super comfortable. So I think that, I don't know if it's controversial, but like you could ask students, like some of my past students are probably like, yeah, it was rough. Like it was rough adapting to what I was asking them. But like, I think the end results tend to speak for themselves. And in that regard,
let me just cutting in here.
Please.
First off, we're talking about marching band, drum corps, right? in the history of drum corps and then marching band is, right, like out of a military tradition. So there is, and you think about being trained in the military, going through boot camp and all that stuff, which I never did. But I've seen a lot of movies where there's a lot of yelling, okay? There's a lot of people rolling around in the mud and getting grinded down. But we're talking about music, an art form, right? Now kind of being blended into this, like, hit your dot, and if you're out of line, and we can talk about, dressing the line or the dot or whatever, which you've done in other podcasts. We don't need to get into that, but,
Right.
It's an art form now. There's body, there's dance, there's really insane playing going on at a level that is just insane right now, right? So trying to blend these things of the discipline, of the physicality of it all, working together as a group, as a team, as you might in the military, and then also being an artist. It's blending these worlds together that don't necessarily gel well together. So what is your take, having gone through it, having designed for it, and being in that, maybe, I don't want to say the coach mindset, but being able to coach people, which I think is a good thing. Flow Sports, wrestling is one of our number one sports that we follow, and I've been able to go out and see these top tier coaches, and it is pretty remarkable what they're able to get their athletes to do. And it's all out of like love, even though it sounds really loud and there's yelling. It's like a different way of coaching and helping those kids grow. Anyway, I'm kind of going around in circles here, but getting back to the question, how do you blend these seemingly competing worlds into one cohesive thing?
Yeah, I mean, every situation requires a different approach. I don't think that I would tell you that every single like piece of information I've ever given was like in a certain way. Like there's certain times where we're working on something that's more like musically oriented or more like choreographic or whatever, and it's like gonna take a different approach to get a different result. So like I'm not always, loud and yelling. Like sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's very chill. And like I do like being very relaxed, and I do like stepping back and letting the students take hold of the way the rehearsal is paced and flows. But hey, like if you're looking at a group and you're looking at a drum line, for example, and you're like, man, they're boring. They're boring. You know why they're boring? Because they're being taught boring. And they're not being asked to express an aggression. They're not being asked to be performative. So like for me, like that performative maybe coaching is seen when you watch Crown in the lot at finals, and people, they come up to me and they're like, that's a group that looks like they know exactly who they are. And like, I think like aside from just me, like our whole staff has such a strong identity, like all the individuals and as a collective, like we do have a vision together, whether it's a little different person to person, but we look at the group, and let's say like if we're slacking off and they're slow, I'm going to like be a sheepdog. You know what I mean? Like I need to herd them in a direction that I want them to go. And I think something that has stuck with me that Rich Hammond said to Travis and I back in the day, he was the director of the cadets in CWP for a while, was like, if the students tick, you're going to let them tick. Or rather, if the students tick, you are letting them tick. So it's that mindset where it's like, if I'm watching my own group and they're not playing well, I'm letting them play badly. And I need to figure out what to do to motivate them to not play that way. And frequently they have no idea that they're playing bad or that they're slacking off, because like when you're in July, like they're beat up, like their bodies are beat up, their minds are beat up, their hands, honestly, your hands feel bad all of tour. Your hands never feel good until like 2 or 3 weeks after tour is done. So they have like not a great sense of like actually what's going on, especially because as an instructor, you're like looking at the whole thing from outside. So like you kind of have to read exactly what you're seeing and hearing and feeling, and like looking at their eyes. Like you can look at a drum line's eyes and go like, they don't like doing this. or it's like they love doing this, or like this person's not in, this person's checked out, and they're going to go to the Blue Devils next year or whatever. Like, you can read that, you can see all of that, and like I am personally a person who sees that, and I will intervene on that. Where I think other instructors, maybe possibly like controversial, would be like, oh, like this is all about the students, and like they should always be having a good time, even if they sound bad, even if they look bad, even if they miss their dots. Like, I don't believe that. I think that it is my job to teach them the standard, no matter how uncomfortable, so that when they look back on the videos, they're like, wow, this is so awesome. I never thought I would be able to do this, which is like exactly how I felt after marching. Was like, man, that hurt a lot sometimes, and like I felt bad about myself sometimes, but like looking back on the videos, like I'm super proud of what we did, and I don't regret the pain that I had to go through. So, it's just, it is intervening in some like semi-awkward social situations with a student, where like a student, is angry or upset, and you have to pull them aside and be like, hey, like that's not a situation where you're going to like berate them. You're going to go like, hey man, like I can see in your eyes, like you're really mad. Like, you're hitting the drum, you're like looking around angrily, like everyone can see it. And now we're talking about like social cues as a teacher. This is not just like I hear dirt and anyone can hear a tick. I'm sorry to tell everyone out there, but like the fact that you hear a tick in a top drum line, even a winning drum line, is not like a special characteristic of the viewer. What is special is how you intervene on the error, or even finding the root of the error. Because it's not always just musical. It can be like emotional, psychological, physical. And it's knowing like this person needs this. Like, I know my students where I can like dig in on them and they're like, yeah. And I know my students where if I do that, they shut down. And you find those students at every level. So I don't know if it's controversial, but it's like, I personally believe like I should be intervening on someone who is having a problem, and I shouldn't like wait for that problem to alleviate. I don't see that as like as an answer, because we are like on a timeline. It's very like finite.
I have a couple more DCI, WGI specific questions, and then I want to get into something a little, I don't know, not lighthearted, but more into you. So the last couple things I got are, one I just thought of that I don't have written down. You were saying how some cores are exciting, or drum lines are exciting to watch, or might be boring. But I think that has evolved over the years, right? So what is exciting now maybe didn't even exist 10 years ago. Surely not 20 years ago. I mean, who plays like Crown drums the way that you've been working with them and has developed over the past, so many years? Same drum line, different kind of style maybe. We've talked about this before, how you've been working with Crown, doing more body. During Beast, you were down to the drum is something that you were really focusing on then. But getting the kids, and I say kids, I mean performers, to play, to emote, to play not just here, but play out here, and I think that kind of change within the activity is becoming more and more apparent, right? Where we're performers, not just a snare drummer and not just a mellophone player. You are no longer always wearing a hat, a head covering. So now your face is important. And when you're out there in the lot, you don't normally wear a hat anyway, right? So the drummer's faces are always there. And you can either be, scary guy, 1,000-foot stare, or you're, I don't know, some new version. So how have you helped build Crown and that identity with the other people you collaborate with at Crown? And how, as a whole, have you seen the activity move to this more theatrical, for the lack of a better word, approach of emoting while performing?
Right. That's a very like deep rooted question, especially the second half of that. And I hope to provide like a decent answer. I think that when you look at where drum corps started, it was very predicated around skill sets that you demonstrate. So as a drummer, you would, and like fife drumming, which is like on the rope tension drums, is where we emerged from. And I actually am going to do an episode with like two of the best fife drummers out there, rope tension drummers out there. I'm super excited to do that. My friends Colin and Brendan Mason. But that style of drumming is very rudimentally oriented, where there's a predictability to the figures you're playing. It's quite musical, but it's more straightforward in terms of like rhythmically, in terms of the approach to it. It's a little bit more just about like what's on the page and like demonstrating like a rudimental skill set, like very, very well, and having a lot of chops and just like, and I guess as well, looking at, you know, color guard and brass, the musical selections, you're essentially just playing the tune. You're playing a chart. For color guard, you're demonstrating a skill set, right? And that skill set is like, oh, you're doing this well. And if you think about that, and then you think of the judging system. So the judging system used to be ticks. So it's binary. There's no interpretation. There's no like human element other than like you're using your ears. You hear a tick, you mark that off, or you mark them down. So as drum corps evolves, right, and we go from playing like a rudimental approach, and I can obviously speak to the percussion side of this a little bit more, we start to obviously integrate the front ensemble, which opens up so many colors, so much variety, so much expression, so just different instrumentation, orchestration. It requires more from the judging standpoint. So now the judges, rather than us having a tick system, looking at like a rudimental approach, they need a new vernacular to read like a more like orchestral and modern sort of approach or arrangement, right? And if you think about a group like Star 91, 2, and 3, when Tom Hannum was writing, like he introduced this method of writing that was like, it wasn't just like block where everyone's like playing the same rhythms across the page and like, yeah, there's like rounds and there's like bass splits or whatever, but it's like the voices are being used to highlight the brass orchestration, for example. So now like the timbre of a snare drum is being used not because it's like Kevlar or Mylar and I'm like just chopping out. It's like the snare drum serves as a specific voice in the orchestration. So it's this ping-ponging of what is being arranged and what is being thought of from a designer standpoint, and then the way that the vocabulary is being shaped to evaluate that. Like we can't use a tick system to evaluate something that's more complex and more intellectual. So that's like a holistic process that's feeding itself like in a cyclical way. And obviously at some point WGI intervenes where the costuming is different every year. The identity of the group honestly changes every year. And then you see in drum corps too, like we haven't seen the cadets wear the cadet uniform since, I mean, they were wearing the black ones and the white ones in like 12, 13, 14, 15, and then I think 16 they were wearing a black one with like the stone sash, and then 17 they're off the rails as in terms of their traditional uniform. They're like one of the most traditional corps, right? So same with Cavaliers. We haven't seen the Cavalier uniform, but iterations of it that stick to the identity but branch out because every program now is so holistic that you can't do these programs wearing a marching band uniform. It doesn't make sense anymore. And I think, you know, the Bluecoats and Vanguard are both great examples of, and Crown too, though I think Crown has stuck a little more to like, we still want to have some kind of shako, right? Some kind of like that classical drum corps element. But I think it's a matter of like, you have like the evolution of the writing and the music and the programming being super like cohesive and like total, and then like the words being used to evaluate that and the methods being used to evaluate that have to evolve too, and then the core is like then evolve for the sheets because they want to complete what the sheets are like and what the top groups are doing, right? And it's like this back and forth. And I think that indoor has obviously been a huge facet of that, like you're saying, in terms of like, what does your face do, right? And I think when you think about, you know, my example tends to be like drum set players. When you watch great drum set players, like way back, like amazing drum set players like Buddy Rich or Gene Krupa, whoever, like they're not sitting there like playing because they're feeling the music, right? And I really like, okay, let's go back to controversial. Like I am so flabbergasted with these old guys on YouTube, and like I try not to read the comments because like I get mad, but like these old people are like, this isn't DCI, like all this fairy dancing and all these like on Crown videos, which is hilarious because Crown used to be like one of the most strict drum lines up to a certain point, saying that like we're not doing what like this is. And then I'm like, go look at Travis Barker play drum set. And like when you turn the sound off on a drum set player who's good, you still can feel what the music is. So I think that like as the music has become like, in a sense, more musical, more complex, why wouldn't you want to express that? Yeah, when you're like going like and just playing single six tuplet accent tap figures, yeah, why would I like there's no like musicality for me to like emote, right? It just doesn't make any sense. So like I think it's a totally natural progression as the music has become more complex, has become more layered, as we figured out how to use the voices in more interesting ways. That has come out in the way that we perform the music too. And I think like the body movement is like that next level to it. And we've seen these groups both indoor and then outdoor a little bit later. Like, why wouldn't you move your upper body and your lower body in a way that enhances and supports the music that's being played? Because we are trying to get read, and we do want the music to be read by a judge on a first read. So I guess if I could like tie that into the crown thing, for me, it was like, this music feels a certain way. It should look a certain way. It's a visual activity. We like, it's so many people are like, you know, you sound like what you look like, and that's why your heights have to be clean. Like, well, that's like sort of true. It kind of doesn't matter, like in terms of uniformity these days. But like, if you are able to uniformly express the music in your body, then judges and fans and whoever is going to be able to like watch and go like, I understand the musical intent because of their movement. The movement doesn't take away from the musicality. I would argue that Crown is playing more musical than they ever have. And like that's because of the writing. It's because of like what we've put our heads together on to bring the group forward, at least from a percussion standpoint, that we want to try to be maximal in our expression. All the body does is try to enhance that. All the movement does is try to bring that to light. So as a person observing it, if you don't have like a musical ear for that, you're watching, you're like, wow, like they really move in a way that like flows with their hands and like will make changes to the music to enhance the movement at times too, especially with like quad rounds. Like if they're crossed over their left hand, but like everyone else is leaning to their, like if the left hand's crossed over the right, we'll change that to the low drum on the left side so that it works together and that it's all like connected. So it's hard for me to like pinpoint, because this has been such like an evolution since like, I don't know, like drum corps really started, you know, and since we started to branch out more theatrically and, you know, thinking about groups like the Cadets and Cavaliers that were like, and the Blue Devils that were like very forward thinking and Vanguard and every group, you know, that's pushed themselves. It's like a testament to every group, and that everyone's like looking around at their peers and going like, what are they doing? What are they doing? So I just always get so like, I think it's hilarious that people are like, we need to go back to like when it was a tick system and we're like playing two heights. It's like, so you want to devolve. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, this isn't what it's supposed to be. Like, this is literally what it's supposed to be, because we've evolved from what it was to what it is. Why would we go back? It makes very little sense. Like, I don't really understand that argument at all, because that's just not where this has all evolved to. That being said, I don't think every group is doing it great. I think that groups want to do it great and be the best and be forward thinking, but they're not, and they think they are. So, you know, that's also part of the fact that this is competitive. And like you were saying, it's an art form, but it's also more, you know what I mean? It's also more that we are competing for a score, and that we're competing for students. We're competing for funding. The better you place, the more souvenirs you sell, the better funding you have, the better recruiting, the better social media presence. This all feeds into each other. So it is competitive. And I mean, like, artists also want to sell their art. Like, I mean, it's great if you sit there and you paint on a canvas, and if it's for no one, but it makes you feel great, I think that's really awesome. And it's good for you. And it, like, not everything needs to be for the purpose of like putting it out there, but for what we do, it's like, I do want to be the best, and I do want to be as forward thinking as I can be in this moment, and not look back 2 years later and go like, I missed so much. Like, I totally missed the mark. Like, I just don't want to do that. So like, you know, I don't know if that is like the perfect summation of how the activity has evolved, but I think the expression comes from all of us wanting to be more expressive. And maybe you could zoom out to what kids are like these days, and that the kids are probably more in touch with their emotions than ever. And that kids are probably more able to like be emotional, because like we're not just in this like place where like being masculine's like this or being feminine's like this. So like, and that comes from like the mid 70s, early 80s, like French philosophy. You know what I mean? So like now you think about like the cultural milieu of like how we perform ourselves, and then that evolution, how that has pushed drum corps, but drum corps is reactive. You know what I mean? Like drum corps is very slow to the uptake because we do have people pulling us back and holding us back. But I think that like cultural shifts that you see are 100% parallel to shifts you see in drum corps. So actually that might be my best answer for that.
It is it's interesting to hear you actually talk about the competitive side, because so many designers and people within the activity don't know that's not the number one thing, right? And I'm not saying you're saying that's number one either, but it is a part of it. And everything you said about how it feeds into itself, right? And it really is a nonprofit or a business at the end of the day. You know, you need to get the bus down the road, you know, get the semi truck down the road. And that costs money, real world dollars that either has to come from donations or money that the Corps generates. And we don't necessarily need to get into that stuff, but the fact that the judging plays a role clearly into the placements, but the way that you design shows feeds into the judging, and then the placements have a role to play in the merch sales and how people view and value your core. And that's a very real thing, as weird as it may sound to other designers or core directors or fans of the activity. Your perception of how good a drum corps is makes you want to go or not buy a shirt from the merch booth. You know, and it might be how their faces were like emoting in the parking lot, or how clean those single, you know, sextuplets were, or whatever. I mean, it could be something very random, right? Like that. Or your dad or mom marched there, you know, 15, 20 years ago. Who knows where loyalty comes from? I don't know. But it's all connected. It's not just one thing. It's not just how well you place. And it's not just how cool they look in the lot playing their book. It's something else that you can't really define, and I think that might be the artistry of it, you know, and just how
taste.
Yeah, you're gonna identify with the core. I know for me, the Cavaliers. It was because my teachers in high school were all Cavaliers people.
Classic Texas.
Yeah, so my instructor at the Woodlands was and still is, Andy Salmon is still there, and he was the timpani player for 95, you know, the Planets. And I just think it's so cool. I get to like listen to the Planets and be like, I know that guy. Like, that's so cool. And then not that much longer was he teaching at the Woodlands, you know, 2000, whenever I was going there. You think, you know, this 20-year-old then just started teaching at his first, you know, school out of high school or out of college, and he's still there, like, which is insane to me. He's like had 20 years there, but that kind of started this love for the Cavaliers. I actually auditioned there. Yeah, I don't want to brag about it. Got cut. Auditioned for the front ensemble. I was a snare drum player. I broke my back right after high school, so I was like, I'm not going to carry a drum around. I would love to do the activity. Wanted to recover for a couple years, and then by the time I wasn't a great mallet player. You think you're just gonna walk up, fly to Chicago, and like make the line, you know, in 2006? Like, no. Yeah. The second year I actually got a call back in 2007. Got cut there, you know, me and 3 other people. It's fine. I'm not bitter, okay? I'm not.
You shouldn't be, because you have this awesome job. So
no, I'm really not bitter. Everything worked out for the best, and I've toured the country in a rock band, completely different situation. So I got my music out of me some other way, and went to college for music, which actually is a great segue. College, right? Because none of what you've been talking about is formal education. You know, it's real world education. You've done it. You've been around people that do it, and now you're doing it around other people that are doing it, and you're like growing out there. It's like, you know, yeah. So But you didn't study music, right? Or you didn't study education?
Yeah, no, I in high school I was very heavily involved in like jazz ensemble, and I was like winning awards for drum set, and I was like moving in a
Humble
direction
brag.
where I was thinking, I love drum. I wish I was like good at drum set, but I once I, and maybe this is just me, but like once I got on the marching track, like it was so affecting my drum set playing, where like my band director was like, "You play too loud. You play too loud. You're like the last voice that's meant to be heard." So, and just like I was moving a different direction. So I originally intended to go to undergrad for like drum set performance or jazz performance or something like that. And I went into undergrad as a psych major, which I did for 2 semesters. And I got like a C- in my Psych 101 lecture, which had like 300 people in it at Temple University. And, honestly, throughout all of that, I'm just like drumming. Like all I really care about is like snare drumming, throughout my whole undergrad career. But I switched from psych to English just because I was like, I get good grades in English, and I like pretty easily, like I don't know why, but I'm like kind of more naturally attuned to that, which at the time I didn't know why. Now I think I do. But I switched to English. I do 2 more years at Temple University in Philly. And I was like in and out, and it was like crazy expensive. Like my loans are like $30K a year, which I'm obviously still dealing with. And I wasn't really like paying attention to school. Like I don't remember much of what I did at Temple. Wasn't really doing that well. And I was more, involved with indoor drumline and obviously drum corps. And then I took a semester off of school in 2012 when I was marching Rhythm X to move to Columbus. And then I transferred from Temple to University of Connecticut, Stamford, and I moved back to my parents' house because it's like local. I can drive there. It's about 20 minutes away. And at University of Connecticut, my class size like was divided by 50. I mean, it was like almost like graduate seminar style with like 10 people. And at UConn Stanford, I actually, I got some really good advisors. And my advisors cared about me. They knew me, which I never experienced at Temple, which is a huge institution. And they, I had one of my professors, my capstone professor, which is like that final class where you write like almost your undergrad thesis. He, at a certain point, about a year before I finished, was like, you're a couple credits away from getting like a women's studies minor. So I was like, oh, okay, let's do it. I'll take a couple classes there. So I started to take women's studies classes. And I graduated in 2013 with my undergrad in English and a minor in women's studies. And what do you do with an English degree? I honestly don't know, because I don't really want to be a classroom teacher. So, and that's like the main kind of, I guess, track for that. And, after my undergrad, I'm like floating around. I actually was teaching music as an artist in residence at Cheshire High School and teaching their marching percussion. I was teaching indoor. I was teaching drum corps. I was doing like, honestly, a lot of side jobs. Like I've had a lot of part-time jobs, even like throughout all of this, because it's hard to make money doing just drumline. So I've like had a smattering of random jobs too. Because I've really wanted to make, marching arts a priority. And then I think in 2015, I was like, oh, I'm going to apply to a bunch of PhD programs. Failed miserably at that. Maybe it was 2016, actually. I completely did that wrong. I had no idea what I was doing, and it was just a mess, and I got rejected from them all. But I was living in Dayton, Ohio at the time, because I was teaching Rhythm X. I was teaching a lot of programs out there, like 5 different programs. And in Dayton is Wright State University, which is where the Nutter Center is, and they had a funded master's program. So I applied using my like undergrad kind of materials, my essay that I wrote for my senior year capstone.
The Kafka on the Shore.
It actually was writ about that book. Yeah, it was about a trans character in Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. And I got into Wright State's program, and I quit my full-time job working at Fred J. Miller. I was like a customer service assistant doing some marketing work there. And then I entered Wright State. It was funded, not a lot of money, but I was able, like Dayton has like a great cost of living. So I was like doing that. Throughout my master's, I was also designing for Connexus, for George Mason, working at Crown, working at 3 high schools, like still doing I didn't stop drum corps at all.
So you're in the middle of a master's program at Wright State doing all this other stuff.
Yeah, and teaching intro English to freshmen, first year college writing. That's how you get the funding, is by teaching as well. So I was also learning how to be a classroom teacher, which was honestly a really great time. And Wright State's really small and underrated, but my education at Wright State was so personalized. Like all of my advisors, all of my professors, like really cared, really got to know me. They completely supported what I was doing in the marching arts, and they saw how my work in the marching arts was feeding my kind of just what I was doing in the literary world as like a writer, doing research, reading literature, and like thinking about, like, I guess the main thing is analysis and synthesis. And if I could think about what makes me, like, I guess, predicated towards English and maybe okay at designing and teaching, is that I'm able to like analyze and synthesize information that's not like data, because this is like human, ideas. It's not like math problems. So I think that like the literary kind of training has helped me like think about the way that shows are laid out and the way that people absorb entertainment and like storytelling and narrative. So I was very well supported, and I was like actually kind of ping-ponging back and forth, like writing essays about memory and nostalgia, and then designing the memory archive for George Mason. And then I'm researching and writing about hip hop and music and capitalism, and then designing Fringe. So there was a lot of back and forth there. And then in my second year of my master's, because it's a 2-year program at Wright State, I decide I want to pursue a PhD, which is obviously the highest level that you could pursue in education. And I applied to 6 programs, and I got into 3 of them, which is really cool. And was surprising. And I was like, whoa, this is great. And I was like very excited about like the prospect of like getting a doctorate. And last year I was at the University of Delaware doing my first year of my PhD, still doing George Mason, Crown, now judging quite a bit, writing for FloMarching, like really staying involved in activity. And let me tell you, the experience I had at Wright State and the way that it was welcomed was like so the opposite at Delaware. Like my professors were essentially saying like, you have to quit everything except this.
Yeah.
They were saying that I was distracted, and that, that I basically like didn't have my heart fully in it, because I wasn't dedicating. I mean, I was literally working like every second I wasn't sleeping. I was either doing drumline or I was reading. Like I was reading 1,000 pages a week. So, they weren't very welcoming, and the environment there was like, they didn't really want me to bring myself to it. They're like, wow, this music background and like your leadership roles as like a creative director of like a pretty large organization that's like pretty legit. George Mason, it's an academic, well, obviously it's an academic institution, but we're out of the athletic bands program. So it's legit. I mean, it's really, really legit. And that looks good on paper. But once I actually got to that PhD level, they were like, oh, you have to quit everything. And they didn't really like what I was bringing to it in terms of like, I think my openness as a person and my I guess disinterestedness in conforming to a specific type. And, I think that as someone studying literature in an institution right now, you have to be politically a very certain way. Your opinions have to be a very certain way. And I probably didn't totally ride that rail. And people were like, what? You actually think that? Well, I do too, but I would never say that out loud. And I wasn't really like willing to strip myself of myself to like get along in an institution that was honestly going to lead me to no job prospect, because there are no jobs in like a tenure track literature professor area. Right. So this year I took a leave of absence. I lived in Delaware last year. This summer I was like, I can't do this. Like I'm killing myself. I've been, this is my 3rd year of grad school. I did my master's, writing the PhD. I've been designing, I've been teaching, I've been judging, doing all this. I was like, I'm burning myself out. I don't like anything that I'm doing. I'm like hating my life. Like it was borderline insane that Mason even got better, while I was sort of at the helm of it, because I was so busy. But because I was busy, I was kind of making it happen. But, I just didn't feel like that Delaware or like the, higher ed was like an environment where I could like be happy or be myself and like still be the person that I am. And not that I'm not willing to conform at all, but like, it was rough. Like the feedback I was getting felt very personal and felt very angry. So again, this is like a learning thing for me as a teacher, is like, give feedback, but don't scare the person away. Cause I was very scared away, and I have very like negative feelings towards some people in the department there. So this last year has been all about the marching arts, and I've been able to invest myself a lot more. I moved from Newark, Delaware to Durham, North Carolina, where my girlfriend is currently a PhD student at Duke. And, she has helped me a lot along the way. And I've been able to focus on like judging and designing and teaching. And like, I really set out to make this year about like, I'm going to focus a majority of my time in the marching arts. And then like all this COVID stuff obviously happened. But this was by far like Mason's best year. And like the outcome of me like not trying to like stretch myself too thin was like, really had a positive effect, I think, on my ability to like bring myself to the groups that I teach. And honestly, groups that have really been respectful of me. Like not a single marching organization has been like, you need to quit your PhD. Like not, at least not in like a serious way. Like everyone was like, wow, like look at what you're doing. This is super impressive. And they saw how my academic work was reinforcing and like strengthening the work I was doing creatively in the marching arts. So, right now I'm not in that PhD program, and I told them I wasn't going to come back. So I'm kind of done with that. And right now, like that wouldn't be what I would choose to do if I went into academia. I would probably choose a different track, because I don't believe in like liberal arts in that way right now. I think that there's a lot of problems, and I think it's a very political time, obviously, and that's extremely magnified in a graduate seminar. It's extremely magnified in a world where everyone sort of leans in a similar direction, and that, alternative voices really aren't welcomed. And like we've been talking about, like you need people to intervene on you who have alternative viewpoints so that you aren't insular and that you're not in an echo chamber. And I like super value that. And it's so hard right now to find that because we are so uncomfortable with that. And I am trying to welcome that a little more and be like, I have friends who don't sway the same way as me. I need that. That's healthy for all of us. So, not in school anymore. I did finish my master's, and I have a master's in English, and I don't know how I'm going to put that to work, but I don't know if I could like explain exactly how I've used that, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I'm right there with you, except I have a master's in music composition. Not really writing a lot of music right now. Right. It's a creative field just like writing and language. So I think it just plays into all the other stuff that I do and that you do. But that piece of paper doesn't really mean anything, by itself.
Right.
Man. Okay. So got a few more things here.
Please.
And I really am enjoying hearing what you have to say, hearing about your background, your ideas. Not to get to COVID-19, but what have you been doing recently? And what do you do outside of the activity? And maybe you're doing more of that now than ever. Who knows? Like whether it's working out, running, like you were saying the other day. What are some things that you just enjoy doing because, man, it has nothing to do with band?
Sure, yeah. I don't know if I'm like that interesting of a person. I feel like I'm not, but I think the first couple of weeks it was really hard to like get on the horse. I'm sure everyone was experiencing that, where it's just like, I just don't feel like doing anything, and like really, really feeling apathy, especially when WGI got canceled, and like knowing that DCI was next. And it was like, a lot of our identities are wrapped up in what we do. And now it's like this very odd format, and like the uncertainty is there. So, there hasn't been much in the way of like designing, like we all decided what to like direction we go in, and then it's been like we can't get ahead of ourselves with WGI 2021 right now, so there hasn't been a lot of that. And same with DCI, we're like, let's try to sort of complete the thought but not go too far to the point that we're gonna have to backtrack, right? So for me it's been like a lot of just like reading novels, which I didn't get to like read for fun for 3 years. So I have like a huge like various bookshelves of like novels and books that I'm trying to like catch up on and like reread some. So there's been,
do you like to read? Fiction, nonfiction? Like what's your go-to there?
I like reading fiction. I like magical realism is a genre that I enjoy, which is essentially like novels that are depicted realistically but have elements that are like magic or that are like non-real or are like fantasy. So like Toni Morrison, she is an author who has really made magic realism really popular. I think Haruki Murakami, who wrote Kafka on the Shore, I'm rereading his novel 1Q84 right now, which is like 1,400 pages. But these are like novels that have like resonant human ideas, but are put forth in a way that's almost like fantasy. And like, I guess I could say like I like fantasy in a way like Game of Thrones and things like that.
Lord of the Rings, that sort of thing.
I actually have never seen Lord of the Rings.
But have you read it?
Yeah. So that's
Well,
more
there you go.
fantasy. That's more fantasy. But if
That's
you
fantasy.
like, imagine if Lord of the Rings was set in like New York City.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
So it's almost
It's like Harry Potter.
Oh, I think that actually is not a bad example because it is convening with the real world. So I think those moments where you see that plot integrate with the real world and see how that happens, I think that is a moment of like magic realism. But Haruki Murakami is probably my favorite author who does that, and he's also probably technically a postmodern author. So postmodern texts are like ones that the identity of the author is questionable. It emerges from a literary mindset. Like I was talking about with like French philosophy, where like the author is considered dead. You don't actually think of the author as the person with authority over the text, and that the person who is interpreting the text is the master of the interpretation. So an author telling you what a text actually about doesn't mean anything. It is all about your interpretation. I think that is really, really interesting, especially when it comes to what we do. Yeah. So,
Well, hold on. Run that by me again. I'm like, okay.
So basically, if I wrote a novel, I am another critic of my own novel. I'm on the same plane of criticism as any single person reading that novel and having an opinion about it.
So just self-reflection.
Even more than that, as the author of the novel, I don't even know what my own novel's about. So to make them, I know that's really heady and weird, but that is actually the baseline method of interpretation and belief in the literary world. And I actually think that you can transfer that into the marching arts, where it's like you're in a judges meeting and you're like, oh, this part of the show's about this. And the judge is like, well, I interpreted it as this, or as I don't know what it's about. And that's like, it's exactly the same thing, you know? Or I have people come up to me and they're like, wow, like this one detail that you infused into the show, like, is this thing. And I'm like, no, when I did that, it was just like meant to be cool, but they're like adopting their own interpretation. So that's like basically what, contemporary like literary criticism, really believes and holds true. And I think actually I think it's an interesting mechanism for any type of criticism, but I also think that the author of a work really does have the authority over the work. Like, I think that's pretty heavy and mumbo jumbo in the real world, but I think it's a great like modality as someone who's a critic or as someone who's an artist to go like, I'm going to create this thing, but I'm understand that there's going to be endless viewpoints of what that thing can be interpreted as. And I should both welcome all those interpretations and also filter them out, and that you're able to think about interpretation in that way, rather than just like everyone's right and I'm wrong, or like I'm right and everyone's wrong. So it's a like way less binary method of like looking at interpretation. So anyway, that's like a really crazy, unwieldy sort of like way around talk about just like I like literature that is opening itself up to various interpretations and that isn't necessarily super heavy-handed in what it is meant to be about. And like those are more like didactic texts. Like people like to read like not self-help, but like motivational texts, or like the reward, the end is the work, or whatever. And like you read a text, you're like, yeah, I'm like fired up, and like people like those. And I like that in a certain way, but I also like, you read a text and you're like, wow, I don't know what that was about, but I feel like this, or I like think like this. So, that's kind of part of my like my little library back here that you can see. And aside from that, like I am probably what some people would think of as like a masochist. So I like to push my body into places of physical harm at times. So, the gyms are closed, but I'm a very habitual like strength trainer. So I like lifting weights that are heavy. And I always felt like that was really important to like my development, like sort of putting yourself in a situation where you could like die or get hurt, and then having to like literally when you're squatting, you're holding a bar that has more weight than your body is. What am I going to do in that moment? And what does your mind have to go through? Because it's like really like a mental exercise too. So I really like doing that. But since the gyms are closed, I have like, I've like run in the past, but I've like gotten more into like long distance running. So I've been trying to like log a certain amount of hours and like run longer thresholds, and that's been super crazy, but it's very similar where it's like totally a mental exercise. So like when you like, I ran like a half marathon, like on a track 2 weeks ago, just because it was like, all right, it's kind of time to go there. And like, especially on a track, it's like really easy to quit and stop, but I like just did it without stopping. And I wanted to see what that would be like as a mental exercise. And I'm also able to listen to podcasts while I run. So I am probably unusual now too, where I actually like to listen to podcasts more than like music usually when I run long distances, because it's like a good time to just like think and just to process. So, and I also like want to understand what the podcast format is now that I have like been given this great opportunity. So I'm like studying, so I understand what successful people do to do this. So a lot of running, like almost daily, and it's actually been raining in Durham all week. So I'm doing a lot of yoga inside. Like there's a lot of good, like whether it's YouTube, but we have like a channel. We do yoga here. So I really like that. I've been doing that actually for a bunch of years. And I teach yoga, like I'm not a trained yoga teacher, though I think that would be really fun to like do a training. I haven't had the opportunity because of band, but I always have the groups that I teach, especially drum corps, do yoga every day. The drum lines at Crown and at Crossman did yoga regularly during spring training, and it helped us avoid injury. So that's all like physical balance. And I don't mean like literal balance, but like I like to like build strength. I like to build endurance and cardiovascular health. And I like to build flexibility too. So it's like this more like 3-dimensional approach to physical health. And I think that like anyone who exercises regularly like knows that they come out of it. Once you stop feeling like it sucks and it hurts, when you can get to the point that you're actually getting like a runner's high or a weightlifter's high or a yoga high, like it makes you like so much more tolerant and patient as a person. So like in this situation where like our default moods are probably pretty bad during quarantine, I think it's really important to like do stuff that is going to make me feel good. But those things tend to be things that feel physically pretty difficult. But I have like embraced that for a long time, and I've been weightlifting since like 2012, like probably 5 days a week other than on tour. And on the road, I'm always running like 5 miles a day or something like that. So just a lot of like of that maintenance, like physical maintenance. And obviously like I think some reading is going to help like not feel like I'm letting my mind get kind of cruddy, because I do feel like when I'm doing too much TV or like on Instagram and Facebook too much, like it's just like you just feel stupid. So I'm trying to like balance that too, but finding ways to use social media to like feel connected and to obviously to like market the things that I'm doing and to like put myself out there, I think has been really important too in like building the brand, building myself as a brand and as a person out there. So a lot of that, like sort of just keeping that balance of like activities, and honestly like watching a lot of movies that I haven't seen before. So like I've watched the first, I think like 5 Rocky movies, because I've never seen any of the Rockies, so had to do it.
Didn't you say you're going to Philly soon? So it's all kind of wrapped in there.
Yeah, well, yeah, those movies are like almost about Philly more than they're about Rocky, because he's like such a dumb character, but like Philly is like such a main character. And I lived in Philly like my undergrad, then I moved back there, so I lived there for like 4 years total, and I'm moving back there July 1st. So I like watching, like, I don't know if you've seen Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but like if you know Philly, like that show is way better because it's so accurate.
I've only been to Philly, a handful of times touring through there. But we ran up the Rocky Steps. I think it counts.
The art museum, yeah.
Yeah, I think we saw some historical monuments there as well. So
It's great.
cool.
It's really cool. You can go to the oldest street in America is there. I think it's Ellsworth Alley. We're gonna have to fact check that one. But the oldest street in America is it's like L's something, but it's like this tiny cobblestone street from like the 1700s or something. But it's really cool. But anyway, I digress. Trying to catch up on like movies that I haven't seen or like shows that are really good and like just kind of chilling out because there's not a lot that we can do right now. So I am doing my best to like not feel like I need to be hyper productive because I think that's such a lame and kind of facade driven mindset that people put out there. Like, you got to set a schedule and you got to like be productive and you got to like do all this stuff. And I'm like, that's important, but also like reacting appropriately to a pandemic is appropriate, and letting yourself like feel scared and like sad and bad is like, I think important that you like actually steep yourself into what's going on and not just like be a robot about it. But like that being said, I'm also telling you, I'm like trying to run like 8 miles a day at least, like do some crazy stuff. But like I am having this time to do that. So I think that's been really fun and cool. And I'm like just trying to like learn new things about like my brain as I like push myself. And obviously I think in this time off, like I've been able to organize and start to schedule, on the 50 and get this podcast off the ground that I'm super excited about and trying to like fill a void because there's so many great podcasts out there in the marching arts that have sprung up in the last couple of years. And I think that they're all doing really great jobs servicing specific niches. But I think that what we're looking to do with this podcast is different. And I think obviously, I love Flow and I love the mission statement of the company and of, how you guys face publicly. And I am just, I'm lucky that I've been able to write for you guys for a couple of years, but it's been really fun to like make this a priority. So I've like scheduled, all but 3 podcasts up through September 1st, like we talked about yesterday, and get some really, really killer guests on the podcast that are going to, I'm going to start recording tomorrow on Thursday. So I'm excited to, I don't know, do something new and like, this is a new project. Like I'm not like a podcaster necessarily. I've been on a lot of people's podcasts and it's been really fun to like talk about band and be analytical about what I do and like what is out there. And I think this is like totally the next step to like kind of put things out there without like the need to make it educational. Like I think there's a lot of podcasts out there that do a great job. Like here's a seminar on this, or here's like a session on this, or here's like this person that does one thing. But like for me, like, yes, I was a snare drummer and I designed for indoor drum lines and I'm like working with the design team at Crown and I like have this background, but I'm like getting all these different people on with varied experiences and backgrounds so that every single episode can be like this totally different, this different journey, this different path. And I'm like super excited because I don't know what is going to come from it, but I'm like very excited and I'm like a little bit nervous, but more like, these are people that I don't know everything about, much like we're talking and going these different routes is like, I don't know everything about everyone in the marching arts, though I know them tangentially or whatever. So I'm excited to like talk to some of these people that I honestly have revered as role models, that I like never thought I would know, let alone like would respect me at all. So I'm really excited about, starting and kicking off on the 50 and getting some of these big names on here to honestly talk a little more personally than, if they were like clinicking or something like that.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a different format and venue than, a forum just to talk about how to get your kids to, be better performers or how to design better or how to do X and Y better. It's who are you? What is this about? And I think we've got to really know who Dan Shak is. We've run the gamut here from like your educational background, working on a PhD to, moving on to different things. I mean, we're in a really weird time in the world right now with the pandemic slowly starting to open back up. But man, I think this is the beginning of something really cool. We've already had 7 weeks in. Actually, tomorrow will be 7 weeks or 7 episodes. And all of them are just so different. All the guests that you had on are so different. Right. And I've seen the list. I don't think we're going to spoil the list right now. But, I mean, damn. Like, there are some really cool people coming down the pipeline.
I agree, and I think that it is important for us to find a great balance between, we can't ignore what's going on. That activity is a little bit at a halt, but everything's at a halt. This is not just us, and the possibility that as we move forward, that things might look different. But what I'm excited about is that we have a period right now where we can reflect on everything we've done up to this point and actually be grateful rather than just like what's next. Like we're so amped up about getting things done and like completing our next season and like making sure things are happening. And right now it's like we get to slow down, and like I'm excited to like reflect on everything we've all accomplished, since the birth of the marching arts to 2019 and into 2020. Obviously, it's not like we haven't seen people do great things in shows that didn't go out and do finals, right? So I'm super pumped about that. I think it's important that we keep the activity alive by having, media like this. I think that it's important that Flow continue to push things out. I think that the Flow radio is going to be huge for that. I love seeing people continue to be creative with the way we're using the internet. And it's almost like this perfect moment where it's like, we can't do the thing that we're used to doing in person, but we do have the tools to do something different that's supporting all of that. And that honestly, when we come out of this, we're going to be way better for it. We're going to be more introspective, and we're going to have had this moment to like think through everything we've done so that we're more careful when we do go back to the field or to the gym, and that it's time to play legatos. It's like, I miss this, and I haven't heard a good drum line or a good brass line in however long, and I'm going to be able to like be grateful for it. And I hope that everyone is grateful for, what all the work that people are doing behind the scenes to produce content, whether it's like this podcast, whether it's educational seminars, whether it's clinics. I saw today Tom Monks is doing a clinic through the cadets with like 6 arrangers from the West Coast. It's like East versus West. And I think that's like brilliant and creative. And it's like a bunch of guys like you don't ever get to see talk. So I hope that, along with like the Instagram and the Facebook, whatever, like that kids trying to break in are taking this time not only to like practice and drum and play and spin and get chops and get experience, but also like use all this technology to get this great information, because like you could show up to an audition knowing exactly what a group is expecting, because they're putting way more info out right now than they ever have, because we have time to do it. We always want to put info out there, but we never have the time, and now we really do. And I think it's honestly probably going to make the groups better, and I think it's going to make our students better. So I am excited to see, like, once we get rolling again, I think it's going to be a little bit of a evolved landscape, I would hope.
Yeah, that is an interesting take. It's the sadness, the anger, the frustration, the one shining light and all that. Well, I mean, there's probably more than one shining light, but one of the shining lights is that there is that time for reflection. Which, would you have taken this year off? Would you have had this time? I'm not saying that that's necessarily good or anything, but you do have this time, and you are doing something unique with your time to keep moving forward. But I think that's a very Dan Shak thing. You're just on those rails, man, and you just keep moving along.
Trying to. I don't think we have much of a choice. I think that you either are like destitute or you like choose to figure out how to make it work for you. And like it's very simple to me. Like let's say when you write a piece, like when you write an essay in a class, the first thing you do is you like edit and analyze your own work, and you have someone else edit it and analyze it. So like this is a moment for us. Like we've never been able to do that. Yes, we have judges, but the judges also have incentives to put things in certain places. There's a moment for us to like look back and be like, what have I done thus far? And like, what do I want to change about that? We really have never had this opportunity. The marching arts have never paused like that. And I think it's going to be really good for us. And like, I also think it's going to help us prepare for like how we move forward, and like things might have to be slightly different. Like, I don't know what tour is going to be like in 2021. I don't know what the indoor season is going to be like, but we are all very like flexible and creative people. So we know that some people or most people are going to go like, I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to use this opportunity to like reformat my approach. And some people are going to be like, I can't do this. And we'll see how people kind of emerge out of this moment. So it can be boring. It could suck. It can be sad. Like we're all missing performing. Some people lost a year of opportunity, but I say to those people, don't wait then. If you are waiting to involve yourself in a world-class group, there's no time like the present to get involved. And, like if you lost a year, get fired up and get in there, because you never know what's going to happen. We don't know what the future holds with how these. We got super comfortable with the format of like fall, indoor, drum corps, audition seasons. Like we got into a monotonous comfortability, and now we're not. We're like, wait a second, I'm losing a year, and like age outs get an extra year, and people are upset about that. It's like, yeah, you're using a year. Why didn't you get in earlier? You should have gotten in. So again, maybe a controversial statement, but I don't think that we should extend the age out for everyone. I think we give the people who lost this year, they were in the group, an extra year, and everyone else, like, sorry, but we can't, I don't know, we can't overreact. I think that's been important to this moment too, is like, let's not overreact. Let's be careful in how we proceed so that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yes.
Another controversial idea that I've had for a while is if you never made any drum corps, got cut, the 2 times you audition, as the case may be, you should still have one option, one option year, even if you're well into your 30s, maybe you could still make the line. Just kidding. Oh my God. Not a real idea. Well, how bad would that be though? You have like the 50-year-old dude that like never made, drum corps, like going out trying to make the line. That would just be weird. I guess that's not what it's all about.
Well, Chris, when I was 14, marching the Connecticut Hurricanes, I was marching with 60-plus-year-old people.
Well, yeah, in DCA.
In DCA. So that is a reality.
It's not weird in that setting, I guess. Trying to think about, making the Cavaliers line again, 20 years later, that would be a little bit, very silly.
I don't think there's any controversy, because we would, at Crown at least, would be like, all right, I think anyone can try out. Like if we did away with the age out limit, anyone can try out. Okay, visual basics block. Here we go. I would know exactly who to cut. You know what I mean? Like we end up cutting good players all the time who show that they aren't physically prepared. So it would be no different. It'd be like, yeah, you as a 50-year-old, you might have chops somehow. I don't know how. But once you put a drum on and I start making you do the things we do in visual basics, it would weed you out right away. So I don't think that would be that crazy. And
maybe this is we're onto something here for all the trolls out there, the old guys that want to take a dump on everything.
Try out.
Put a drum on. Let's have an old folks camp. Come drum with like the young kids and see if you can actually hang, or if you just want to talk on the internet.
Well, I think that's hilarious, and I think honestly, like, we have these outlets for people to march. Like, go march an all-age corps. Obviously, those are geographically based more on the East Coast, but we have a big problem in drum corps where, like, even students who don't make top 3 drum corps or don't make a top 12 drum corps, rather than going to a drum corps that isn't a finalist, or going to an open class drum corps, or going to DCA drum corps, they don't march at all. That's very, very frequent that happens. And I always try to put out there, like, if you get cut from the Blue Devils, if you get cut from the Crossmen, if you get cut, any array of group that's in that top kind of spectrum, go march the next best group. Go march open class. Go march DCA. Like, do you really think staying home and padding out, or staying home and like practicing alone, is going to be better than getting an education with someone in front of you? I don't believe that would be the case in almost any situation. So much like the old people, like if an old person has a problem with where drum corps is headed, get in the line and do something about it. Like, why aren't you marching and trying to like actually participate? So that's one of those things where it's like, do the observers of the activity deserve as much of an opinion as the people that are involved? As we discussed earlier with critique, like, I think that we live in a world where being a critic of something that you've never done is very popular, and I think it's really silly. I think that you need to go a certain distance and a certain experience to be able to input your opinion on something. That's just me. I think it's weird for, like, if I'm 5'6" and I cannot play basketball, to go back to basketball analogy, for me to sit there and like try to like talk about how the 76ers play is so dumb, because I'm 5'6". How am I even going to like, I can't even imagine a life in the body of someone 6 feet tall. How am I going to talk about their biomechanics? That is so stupid. So I just think that's very like cool right now, is to be like, this is what the politicians should be doing. It's like, do you have experience in the political realm? Have you looked at the data? Have you actually done the research? Do you understand how to do research legitimately? Probably not. So it's like, I just try to like, I don't know, people need to stay in their lanes. And like, I probably haven't always done that, and like, that's fine. And like, we all tend to go outside of our lanes because like, it can be healthy to extend yourself intellectually, for example. But man, it's like, it's not cool to like shred something that you don't actually know how hard it is. Like, that really like is just like completely frivolous.
Man, well, on that note, do you want to shred anyone? The floor is open to shred.
I don't.
Have you ever shredded some other thing that you don't really know? Like, is this personal experience coming back like, dang, I really shouldn't have talked about the 76ers?
Me personally, no, because I've had this great training in the academy where I've thought about criticism, on a theoretical level, and I thought about feedback, and I thought about those things. And so that's not intuitive. You know what I mean? I was trained to be metacognitive, and think about the way that I react to things. So that's been really helpful for me. But like these days, like you see people online, and it's like, are you going to be proud of the things that you're saying like down the road? And like, I always try to think like before I post something, am I going to like, is the future version of myself going to be okay with what I've done? And like, we're all imperfect. So it's fine that I like can say like, no, sometimes I probably did something I shouldn't have done or said something I should have said. But there's like people that are like older than I am and more experienced than I am that like really are belligerent, criticizers. So I'm just trying to like learn and like maybe like get some wisdom, as someone who's like, I'm not 30 yet. I'm turning 30 on June 4th, but try to get on top of that, because it's very cool to be like a degrader of things. And I think that as a person, I guess you're asking me like from experience, like I think I was probably more cynical throughout my 20s and obviously in my teenage years. And I wish I was like not as cynical. I wish I was more like open and not thinking I knew everything. And I think, now it's like I'm at least trying to head towards like, a more like humble and open mind. And, maybe that's what makes me semi-qualified to do these podcasts, is like, I really don't have like a strong opinion about the things I don't know, but I do have like a thirst to like hear people's opinions and like understand things better. Like I don't understand how color guard people do the things they do or the culture that they have, but I'm really excited to talk to esteemed color guard leaders who are going to like totally teach me about what they do. Not that I have an opinion about it, or I might have one once they start talking about it. But I'm just excited to like learn more about that. So that's my mindset with this, because I'm just like so like sick of people like having such strong opinions about things that honestly like they don't know anything about. So it's just not a great like entryway into the world. It's like this like strong invalid opinion that's really not based on anything. So that's more of like my disillusionment with like the way people use their voice publicly and social media and things like that. And people are obviously going to disagree with me in these podcasts that we record, but like that's why we're going on an hour 48 right now, and it's like you might disagree with one thing I said, but like what about everything else? So I'm hoping like the format of these, like it's harder to like cherry pick, a quote and be like, this is everything that he thinks. It's like, it's not. It might be what I say right now, or it might be my response to something you asked me, but I'm very like malleable in terms of my opinion on things. And I don't know everything about everything. So I'm very excited to like keep expanding. You know what I mean? I bet by the end of all these podcasts, or even like by the end of this one, like I've learned something. I've been able to articulate something differently, or like, talking to the people I've even talked to so far, like, it's just like mind blowing. But if I was sitting there, I was like, I'm just going to input my opinion. Like it wouldn't make for a very good conversation. And why don't I just like rant alone into the microphone? That's why I get people from groups that are like so philosophically different than the groups I teach. Cause then you learn they're really not, you know what I mean? So that's been an exciting kind of like prospect here. And, it's going to help me like just think better. So I think that's important.
Well, I think this has been very a very healing thing, being able to talk to someone outside of my family, for almost 2 hours now. I mean, it's like insane just getting to know you a little bit more and getting to hear your story. I really appreciate everything that you're doing, and I really look forward to what On the 50 is going to turn into. Some really cool episodes out already. If anyone hasn't seen those, check them out. You have any final words for us, Dan?
No, I agree. I mean, check out the episodes that are out there. Subscribe to FloMarching, support FloMarching. They're one of a kind. I have no incentive to support FloMarching other than I truly believe in what you guys do, and you work super hard, and I just want to be a part of that. And I think anyone who loves the marching arts should love Flow. So I'm always just like a positive cheerleader for FloMarching. And everyone, anyone can hit me up on the side, Instagram, Facebook, come find me, come talk to me. If you want to be on the podcast, let's talk about it. If you want to talk to me about really anything, I'm just kind of an open book. So I'm excited to just continue kind of learning and continue putting information out there, whether it's new, whether it's repeated, whether it's stated in a new way. And I'm just thankful for the opportunity to do a little work from home, and keep moving things forward in a time where it feels like we're stopped.